A lot of people think if I just do really well at my job, if I'm just an outstanding performer, I'm going to get promoted. And that's not actually the case. When they promote, they very rarely promote because they're grateful for you and they love you and they think you're just wonderful. It's actually more of a risk assessment for them. They have a need, they've got to fill that need. And when they look at you, you're the least risky person for that job.
I always get bypassed by my boss and I'm the top performer. I'm the best performer.
My job is not to see myself be successful. My job is to make my team successful. And if my team is successful, then they assume I'm a good manager and that gives me opportunity. Life is far too short to not enjoy what we're doing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode with Kailyn, your host, me, and at Career Kickstart Conversations. Today, we have Scott Long with us, and we're talking about something you all probably can benefit from, but how to get promoted. So anyway, before we jump in, I'll let Scott do an introduction of himself, and then,
Thank you. I'm Scott Long. I'm currently the Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition and Executive Search at DDN, a company in the data intelligence technology space. We focus on AI. I've been doing this for about 30 years and had both agency background and corporate background. I've done everything from entry level folks right out of college all the way up to senior execs, C-suite, and board member positions. So kind of done a little bit of all of it over the last 30 years.
Yeah, everything.
Exactly.
And today I know that you have that strong executive background. And today he's going to generally speak to the non-executive side of things. Obviously, if you want to pop that in here and there, whatever you want to do. But
Sure.
So we'll just jump right in. So we'll start with strategies. So everyone in the audience knows and whatnot, like how to get promoted. That's from going to individual contributor to manager, director, VP, whatever your company's lineage is. But generally speaking, like what are the steps, maybe to just narrow it down for someone who wants to go from individual contributor to a manager? There are certain steps that they should take.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very common, by the way, for people that want to progress in their career, move forward, take the next step up. It's important to remember that most people realize that just because you're a great individual contributor doesn't mean that you're going to be a great manager. And so a lot of people think if I just do really well at my job, if I'm just an outstanding performer, I'm going to get promoted. And that's not actually the case, right? One of the things that you need to think about is how do I start performing at the next level in terms of the role I want to be? Obviously, you don't have that responsibility in your current role, so you need to start looking for opportunities where you can exercise those kinds of skills, albeit not being paid to do it, quote unquote, not officially having it as part of your job description, but start performing in those kinds of capacities before you ever have the role. Because a lot of people don't realize companies, when they promote, they very rarely promote because they're grateful for you and they love you and they think you're just wonderful. It's actually more of a risk assessment for them. They have a need, they've got to fill that need. And when they look at you, you're the least risky person for that job. Oh yeah, they like you as well. That's great. But they're doing risk assessment because we have to have this job filled. If they see that you've already kind of been doing the job, it's a much less risky situation for them to promote you. And therefore, you're going to be the one that most likely has the opportunity. So that's one of the key things you need to start thinking about ahead of time is, am I just simply doing my job and doing it well? Or am I taking on other responsibilities? Am I showing already I can do that next level job? That's going to give my employer much more confidence that I might be the right person. A second thing that people can do is start building the relationships at the right levels. Just because I have great peer relationships doesn't mean anyone else in the company will know me. And so especially if it's not my boss that will be promoting me, but someone else perhaps, if they don't know me, again, it comes back to risk. I don't know that person. I don't know what they can and cannot do. I'm taking someone else's opinion and trusting it. But when I'm making a risk assessment, I want to know personally that I'm making a good decision. And so starting to get to know the people that would be the managers of the role that you're trying to get into is really good. And it takes time to build relationships where there's trust. And so far before you ever actually want to be promoted, you should already be developing those relationships so that when the time comes, A, you have the relationships, B, you've already shown that you took the initiative and are already acting in that capacity. It becomes a much less risky proposition for the person to promote you.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned those things. So I looked up a few stats, and one of them, in terms of the relationships, It says people who focus on their internal network, and I'm assuming that means like what you said, internal, other managers, internal at the company you work for.
Yeah, or mentors or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, have a 42% more likely chance to get that promotion.
absolutely.
I think it's just general promotion. That was a study done by Wharton.
Yep.
But yeah, 42%. That's like massive. And that's just
Yeah,
people knowing you, like you said.
that's right.
Yeah. And so how does someone figure out, like start doing those next level responsibilities?
Yeah.
So how do they figure that out? Do they just see what their manager's doing and ask for that? Like how do they start showing that or doing those things, if that makes
Yeah.
sense?
So two things. One, communicate your desires properly ahead of time, right? Say to your manager, I'm really interested in being promoted. While I love doing my job and I'm going to be successful and I'm going to do everything I can to really make the company successful and be great in my role, I'll keep doing that. I'm just thinking a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, where do I want to be? I would love to be managing a team or developing this project or handling these responsibilities. What skills, what attributes, what technology knowledge, whatever, do I need to have to be able to do that successfully for the company's benefit? And you're always focusing on the company's benefit, not your personal benefit, right? Because the company's
Yeah.
always thinking about what's best for us as a company. So always, always frame your thoughts in that regard around the company benefit, right? So share directly with your manager. This is my thought, or with HR as well. Sometimes they have career development programs. This is my desire. This is my plan. Here's what I'd like to be doing. How do I get there, right? Some people have mentors as well. Talk to your mentor. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. How could I most add value in this regard? And then the second part of it is start actively, proactively looking for opportunities, looking for projects, volunteering, right? I remember one time at a prior company, the CHRO had a initiative that they wanted to start, kind of a pet project kind of thing. And they said, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I need some help on this. And immediately 2 hands popped up. I'll help you with that. I do, and it wasn't their job. Isn't it interesting that about 9 months later, one of the 2 is promoted, and about 12 months later, the second one was promoted, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that it was a negative thing. It was a good thing. They did the right thing. They went in, they said, I'm willing to take on new responsibilities. I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to learn. They performed them successfully, and they got rewarded with a promotion afterwards.
Great. And so would you say that that communication, like that conversation is always needed? Or if someone feels confident, like, oh, I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to like, is that communication piece required? Or I guess obviously it helps you, but what would you say? Like definitely have the conversation, or
Yeah. So
you can go
conversations can
without?
happen formally and informally, right? So you can have a formal conversation with HR or formal conversation with your manager, say during your normal review process. How'd things go? What happened? What's your results? Oh, I got exceeding expectations. That's great. Very common. Managers will say, what are your next steps? What do you want to accomplish this year? Where do you want to go? And what do you want to do? To be able to say, well, I'd like to move to the next level sometime in the next year. What do I need to do? That's a formal conversation. Informally, again, remembering building relationships, informally, you're talking with other people in your company. You're talking with your manager. You're talking with HR, whoever it is. And you're simply saying, yeah, I've seen these people doing this. I could absolutely see myself in a role like that. I'd love to get there. I'm trying to develop some of those skills. Or, oh, I just did a training on this, and so informally, just in the midst of conversation, making your desires known, expressing very, very clearly where you want to go.
Mhm.
I remember early in my career, I was the number 1 guy in the world, actually, in my recruiting role. I beat my president, actually, in terms of numbers when I was working for an agency. One of the guys I hired was in his office every single week, just chatting, just having a conversation. I had hired him. I was his mentor. Managing partner role opened up in the company, and he got promoted into it. And I'm
Mm.
going, I hired this guy, and I'm the number 1 guy in the world for the company. What's going on? And I went and I talked to the president after he had announced the announcement, and he said, oh, I had no idea. I didn't know you were doing that. He just didn't know. It
Yeah.
wasn't a personal vendetta or anything like that at all. He literally didn't know that I was having the success I was having. He had no clue. And so at that moment, I decided I need to pull a play from this person's playbook. And I started going in and just letting him know how things were going and what was happening, and always casual, always, fair. But when push came to shove, the next opportunity came to be promoted about 4.5 months later. I got promoted to managing director.
Nice,
right?
because he knew and he
Because
was
now he knew.
aware.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So
Yeah.
formal and informal, both of them are important.
I think it helps too. You make a good point. I've heard this in my own experience that when someone is actually able to communicate where they're at, what they want, and be aware of what they're actually accomplishing. I mean, when I'm recruiting in my team,
Mhm.
that's one big thing we look at when we're screening people.
Sure.
You have this on your resume, but can you talk to it? Do you actually know why you did that? Why did you have to make 100 calls a day? And a lot of people say, well, that was just the quota. But no, like, why? What's the purpose? And that's a very, surface level one. But it's like digging deep, understand what you're doing, how you're comparing, and what you want. So I think people don't really think about that. It seems like they just go into a job and go through the motions, and like it's my boss's job to see, and they need to tell me what to do, because obviously everyone wants to get promoted. That's
Right.
in people's heads, but
Right.
it's not so obvious to a manager.
Right.
And managers are really busy doing everything else. Not saying they should neglect you by any means, but
Right.
yeah, I think the communication's key. And then you make a good point. And that's a big challenge for people that, or not really, maybe not, a challenge, hurdle, whatever. But a lot of people say, I see it on LinkedIn everywhere, I always get bypassed by my boss, and I'm the top performer. I'm the best performer. I should have got promoted.
Mhm.
I guess, why do you think that is, or what would you say to that person,
Yeah.
just generally?
So it can be a couple of things, right? The question is not necessarily whether a person has earned it or not. In the example I just gave you, I had more than earned the opportunity. I was mentoring people. In fact, I mentored a person that got the promotion, right?
Yeah.
I was performing my job well. The president just didn't know, right? So you've got that going on. But again, the other question is, can this person succeed at the next level? I've had situations where a hiring manager didn't realize that an individual on their team had the skills to be able to do this. And I had to say to them, by the way, do you know this person's done XYZ already? Have you tapped him on the shoulder and looked at him? Or have you spoken with her and, seen if she knows this job? Oh, I didn't know they did that in their prior job. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so it can be a knowledge thing too. They just might not know. And so that's really critical in doing that. But the other thing too, and I've had this, a direct employee myself, actually in a former company, they were very clear that they wanted to be manager, and every moment of every day, they were making it absolutely clear. And at the same time on their review, I had to talk to them about the immaturity factor and explosive anger and all these kinds of things. I'm going to manage a team. How in the world are you going to manage the team? Oh, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, but you do that in your normal daily experience. Why would I not think that you'd do that as a manager as well? There was no way in hell, forgive my French, but there's no way in hell that I'm going to promote that person to manage a team if they have a toxic kind of personality, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the questions you need to ask yourself, if it's been a situation where you've been repeatedly 2 or 3 times passed over for promotion, you may think you're incredibly successful. You may think you can do the job, but if other people don't, why is that?
Yeah.
And ask yourself the hard question, right? The second part too is, just because you're a great individual contributor, and you really may be, it doesn't mean you'd make a great manager. Or if you're a great manager, it doesn't mean you'd be a great director or director and vice president. They're different skill sets. They take on different responsibilities. And the further you go up the food chain in a company, the more the tasks and the responsibilities become a corporate issue rather than an individual issue. And so if you show that everything you do is for yourself, and everything you do is for self-promotion, and everything you do is for your success, versus trying to help others become successful, that might even work moving into a manager job, but you will never make director or vice president. My job is not to see myself be successful. My job is to make my team successful. And if my team is successful, then they assume I'm a good manager, and that gives me opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So it's looking at your motives. It's looking at how you do things. It's looking at, am I really ready for this? Have I shown them that I can do these things? Do I understand what other people think about me and how I'm perceived in the company? Have I really developed those skills, for example? It's kind of all of that you really need to be looking at. And it's a hard conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people too who, and those are really great, like perfect tips, honestly. But a lot of people think they're doing that.
Right.
They think they're looking in the mirror and like, I do this. And then this, because I've seen it just firsthand, they'll build this resentment towards the company, their boss, whatever.
Right.
And they just build up this anger, and then I see it affect their performance and how they come across to others. But
That's
they're
right.
like, and they usually don't have that conversation, but maybe a listener who's in that position where, you've done everything you can. You looked at yourself, you're listening to this, like, I've done all that. And you feel that, spark in you. What advice would you give them? Is it just, everything have the conversation? Like, where would that person start? Because it seems like that might be a mindset or like a mental block, or
Yeah.
I don't know. Where do you go from there when you're stuck?
It goes back to the relationships, right? As I said, mentor. I've had 4 mentors in my life. My last mentor was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, about $14 billion company. And I approached him on an issue at one point, and I said, "This is what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm going on. This is what the manager said, blah, blah." And he said, "Is that person an absolutely unreasonable individual who makes terrible business decisions?" I said, "No." And he said, "Is it possible that he's not making a terrible business decision when he gives you this specific feedback?" I didn't want to hear that, because that meant maybe the problem is me.
Yeah.
Well, the fact was the problem was me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a wrong perspective on it. I was approaching a situation wrongly, and it took an outside perspective to help me see that, because I looked at, I did this and I did that and I've achieved these and I know these things and I do that. And it's very, very easy to become
get stuck in
our
that.
own
Yeah.
cheerleading squad, right? To pat ourselves on the back, right? If no one else is patting you on the back, then maybe there's a reason for that. And so gratefully, I was taught very early in my career, find a mentor that's not afraid to say the hard things to me. And he was being a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He had no issue saying the hard things to me, right? I didn't work for him. But he told me straight out. He said, "You need to correct this. If nothing else, you need to change your attitude." And I did, and I still didn't get promoted, interestingly enough. Leads to a different situation or a different subject. The company was going downhill, and there was a lot of issues and a lot of problems. And the longer I waited, the more I began to actually see that. And I realized the best thing for me was actually potentially look somewhere else. So after 7 years at this particular company, it was time to move on.
Yeah.
And in moving on, I actually got a promotion, which was great. But sometimes that's what needs to happen. Sometimes if you're continually seeing that you're not getting promoted, if you're continually seeing a lack of progression, and yet you're doing all those things, you're talking to people are validating your skills and experience, you're volunteering for other opportunities, you're showing your success in these things, and other people are validating that, then you look at the company and say, is the company growing or is it shrinking? Is this particular area that I want to get into an area of focus for the company, or is it not? Do I have a person that's been in that job for 15 years and is likely going to serve out their last 5 years before they retire? In which case I have no opportunity for promotion, right? That's when we start asking those questions and say, is it time perhaps to move on and look somewhere else? And that's valid.
Do you think that's something that an employee should go to their boss and ask about? Like, should they research and take into like those data points, those trends, like, oh, okay, we haven't hired in a long time. They just did these layoffs. Should they go to their boss and say, hey, I noticed these things in the company. What does that mean for me? Or should they just notice it? Or should they have a conversation?
It could be both, right? It depends on the company. It depends on the boss, right? I've had boss, there's no way in hell I would ever go to them with that kind of conversation. Because I'd get myself walked out the door just because I disagreed with the company, right?
Yeah.
There are other bosses I could have a very, very straightforward, very blunt conversation. More often than not, there's somewhere in the middle, right? Hey, I've noticed these kinds of things. Am I seeing things correctly? I'm not making assertions. I'm asking questions, right? But they're directed questions. It's also, do I have the best interests of the company in mind, or only my best interest? I referred earlier to a guy that made very clear he wanted to be promoted every single day, right? I knew it was not about trying to make the company more successful. I knew it was not trying to make the team more successful. It was because this individual wanted to be promoted.
Yeah.
And I was not going to promote that person, right? If we can validly show we have the company's best interests at heart, hey, I've noticed that we're kind of weak in this area. We could use some talent and things. I've done this before, and I think I could really add some value here because I think what it would do for the company is this. Now I'm presenting it as a good business decision to help the company grow. And typically good leaders are going to recognize that and give you opportunity if it's there, if they see the same things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But again, it's the difference of the self-serving versus I'm doing what's in the best interest of the company.
Yeah. And that delivery and communication is key. And
Absolutely.
even though it does get you somewhere and everyone has their own self-interest, it's just that delivery is key because
Absolutely.
the person deciding your promotion is the person listening. So you got to.
It is better to have someone else sing your praises than you sing your own.
Yeah. So in terms of timing, because I've heard hiring managers say this, this person just started 3 months ago and they're already asking for a promotion. So it seems like timing's pretty key. What tips do you have for timing? Like how long should someone be in a new role before they start pushing or having those conversations, or does that conversation look different? I know it's very general, but.
Yeah, no, and it really does. It depends on the company and depends on their situation. I had one situation where I came in and I was promoted within 3 months. That's highly rare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it does occur is if you take a job that's more of a lateral move, which by the way is not a bad thing to do. But if you take a new job and it's more of a lateral move, but you have more skills, but they just don't have the opening, when the first opening comes up, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months in, you get promoted because you were the right guy for that job or the right woman for that job anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That does happen. But there are some companies that we just don't have an opportunity. We don't have that need. We don't have that position, whatever the case might be. And so I've waited 2, 3, 4 years before I got promoted. If you go, there's a general rule of thumb, and it's the 80-20 rule, right? You learn 80% of everything that you need to be able to do on a job in your first 3 years, and you learn 20% the next 5 years thereafter.
Oh.
So once you hit the 3-year mark, if you look and go, I have a promotion opportunity within the next 6 months, great. If you say, I'm probably not getting promoted in the next 3, 4 years just because this person's going to retire and they're staying in their job, or because we're not growing in this area, or we're cutting back or whatever, at that point you say, I've learned my 80% already. It's probably good for me to look at a new company and make a move. And I know everyone says you want to stay as long as possible in a company. That may be true. I worked at IBM at one point in time, and we have people that have been there for 40 years. Well, IBM's big enough that you can transfer within the company and take on new skills and new knowledge and that kind of thing. But a lot of companies aren't that big. And therefore, you don't have that opportunity to transfer or to grow or whatever. And so I say, keep the 80-20 learning curve in mind. If after your first 3 years, you have learned that 80%, your career growth was like this, it's now going to be like this. You'll still be growing over the next 5 years, but it's very, very slow. Try to maintain the steepest learning curve you can have. If you can get it within your company by transferring to a new division, do it. If you can get it by getting promoted, do it. If you can't, then you might want to consider, do I need to look somewhere else so I can maintain my learning curve so I can continue starting at the beginning again and go 80% in my new company for the next 3 years?
I love that rule of thumb.
Yeah.
The 80-20 rule. You hear it in everything else, but.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. I've never heard of that before.
Absolutely.
I looked up another stat from Pay Scale. The average time it takes for someone to get promoted internally is 2.9 years. So spot on.
That's exactly where that 80-20 rule probably came from, to be honest. I haven't heard that quote, but
yeah.
It is a candid fact. It's about 3 years. You learn 80% of all you're going to learn in a job.
That's great. Okay. And this is kind of going back to the beginning anyway, but I think this is important for the listeners.
Sure.
So it's going back to the topic of taking on more responsibility. Even with the conversation, say your boss is giving you more responsibility, you keep taking, you're the one that volunteers for projects. And we kind of talked about it. Other people are getting promoted, but maybe your boss is like, oh, well, that person or dad works here, like some excuse, whatever, but you keep doing it. Because I've seen some people on LinkedIn, they're like, oh, I'm getting not literally abused, but abused at work because I'm a top performer and they want me to stay in this area. They keep giving me more and more work to do because I'm good at it. And they're using that against me, thinking like my loyalty's here, I'll never leave. And then, so I guess when does someone leave at that point? I know you've already kind of touched on it, but maybe specifically that example, because that one seems to be really common. Like you're offering all this free work that's not in your job description. I hate saying that, but that's how it's viewed a bit.
Absolutely.
How do you know, and your boss maybe is saying, oh, just keep hanging on there. It's coming. Like they're just dangling the berry in front of your face. Is that time to move or? So,
it can be.
Yeah.
It's not a yes or no question, right? And I want to say this very, very carefully, especially because there are some people out there that may honestly be perfectly comfortable doing the same job their entire life
Mhm.
and not have the quote unquote need or the desire to be promoted. I know, actually, I know of one admin, for example, she just loved what she did. And she was an executive admin for over 20 years. Same company, just loved what she did. She had no desire to do anything further. I know a person that's a quote unquote lower level skill. I know a person who was essentially the chief legal counsel at one of my companies and had been in that role for, I think, 17 years. They had no desire to move on, no desire to do anything else. They just loved what they did and they kept doing it. So we talk about promotion as if that's going to answer all of life's questions. It's
Yeah,
not.
and gonna make you happy, and that's what you need. You have to
That's
get
right.
promoted.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's right.
yeah.
So be really careful and know yourself. And I think that's a really critical thing too. The worst thing in the world you could do is set your ladder up against a wall and climb to the top of the wall and go, I think I climbed up the wrong ladder. That wouldn't
Yeah.
be good, right? I remember taking one job personally. It was a promotion. It was a great opportunity. It was a lot more money. Um, and I was in the job for about 6 months and go, I really don't like what I'm doing. And it was really hard. It was really hard. Gratefully, in that particular company, in that particular situation, I was able to take on some other responsibilities as well, which gave me enough fulfillment in terms of what I was doing that I was able to better balance the other piece of the job, and it worked out just fine. I ended up staying a few years. But if you had asked me 6 months prior, what do I want to do? It would have been that goal.
Yeah.
Had I been wise and just kind of stepped back and said, okay, what do I need to do to that role? I need to have this skill. I'd have this responsibility. I'd be dealing with these kinds of people. I'd have, whatever. I actually don't really like those things, but I had so caught up in my mind, I have to achieve this,
Yeah.
that it was almost self-sacrifice, right? It was work to my disadvantage, really. And so I think kind of knowing yourself and saying, am I cut out for this? Would I like, there's a difference between a seller, right? A salesperson and a sales manager. Sales manager, you might not be carrying the bag anymore. You might not be making cold calls. You might not be making as many client visits, for example, because you're managing your team and teaching them how to sell. And I've had people tell me, I miss client facing. I miss being in front of clients, right? I'm like, well, you're the one that chose to be in management. And I said, what would you do? They said, if I could, I'd like to just go back and carry a bag and make a whole lot of money.
Yep. I've seen that a lot, especially in staffing.
That's
They
right.
get to the management, they're like, no, I'm stuck in an office. I'm not in the field and I make way less money.
It's exactly true. It's exactly true. So knowing yourself a little bit and saying, what do I do and what do I do well and what do I enjoy? Listen, we work way too many hours a week and a month and a year to not love what we're doing.
Yes.
And so be really careful with your next step, right?
Yeah.
If you love what you're doing and you're really good at what you're doing and you're getting affirmation in your success, does it make sense to get promoted? And I know that sounds weird on a podcast about getting promoted,
Yeah.
but sometimes the best thing you can do is say, no, I'm actually good in this role. I'm good in this position. I enjoy what I'm doing. I could see myself 10 years waking up and still being the executive admin.
Yeah.
Right? That's a valid life choice. That's a valid career choice. And you're going to be a lot happier.
Yeah. I think that's becoming more normalized now. I mean,
That's
I
right.
remember just 6, 7 years ago, if I presented a resume that someone went up and then went back down, my hiring managers are like, well, that doesn't show the right, culture fit for us. Why would they do that? But now they're like, don't blame them.
Yeah.
So it's becoming
I had
a little bit
candidate
normal
I
too.
hired once, probably 15 years ago. And he had made it all the way up through executive vice president. And he said, I have probably 5 years left in my career. And I said, I don't have any EVP roles for you. He goes, no, actually don't misunderstand. He goes, I have 5 years left in my career. He goes, the happiest I ever was when I just carrying a bag. That's it. Just carrying a bag, doing my own business. He goes, I made more money than I've ever made. He goes, I would love a sales job. And I was like, are you serious?
That's
Because I'm
cool.
dead serious. Long story short, we hired him. He broke every sales record in the book. Absolutely destroyed it. He worked 5 years in the company and then he retired, just like he said he wanted to.
Yeah.
So there are people like that. And he recognized that and he was in a position he could, and we had the right role, et cetera. It all worked out. But there are people truly like that. And I think you need to listen to your internal little self-speaking to yourself. You know?
I agree. Don't be afraid of the promotion. And if you don't want to get promoted, I don't think it's anything that people are frowning upon anymore. It's like, we'd rather
Absolutely.
you be, a lot of hiring managers, a lot of companies would rather someone be happy in their role.
Yep.
Because that leads to more production anyway for the business.
Yep.
Instead of an unhappy manager who just wanted it for the title or the whatever,
Coming
so.
over here, I left my house. I have some people working on my air conditioning, and one of the guys that I talked to, he'd been doing it 17 years.
Wow.
Installing air conditioning. He goes, I just really enjoy it. I'm out. I meet
Yeah.
a whole lot of different people. I love the electronic part of what I do. And he goes, and the technology changes, so I'm learning new stuff every year. He goes, I'm going to retire doing this. He said, I probably have, 10, 15 years before I retire. But he goes, no need to move on. I just love what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool to meet someone they're just self-satisfied.
Yeah.
That's
almost
a great
like
place
envied
to
that.
be.
It's
Yeah.
like, wow, you found
true.
your place.
It's true.
And you're
Yep.
just happy.
Yep.
Yeah. So up is not always the best direction.
That's right.
I think we're coming up on 30 minutes. Any last minute tips or anything? I mean, this was great. This is really, really great advice for people.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think we covered everything, but anything you want to leave the audience
Yeah,
with?
no, I think being intentional about what you do, keep the career in your hands, not someone else's, right? Building the relationships, that takes time, building a professional brand, being exceptional at what you do, but taking on new responsibilities and being exceptional at those as well reduces the risk that a company has and the potential of promoting you. And enjoy what you do. If you ever notice that you're not enjoying what you do, that's when you step back and look and say, is it the company? Is it me personally? Is it just my job? But enjoy what you do. Life is far too short to not enjoy what we're doing.
Yeah, and works too many hours for
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights. This is huge for people.
Happy to do so.
and
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, thanks for watching. Comment, like it, subscribe, and talk to you next Tuesday.